Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is actually an update to a deep dive that we did back on October 5th when we really dug into Social Security and, all the complexities. Remember the Windfall Elimination Provision
Yeah.
and the government pension offset?
Absolutely.
All those provisions that can impact retirement benefits for public servants like teachers, firefighters, police officers.
Yeah, we covered how those could actually lead to some unintended consequences for people who dedicated their careers to public service.
Right. And it looks like things have moved pretty quickly since we last spoke. We've had some big developments with the Social Security Fairness Act.
Yeah, that's right. On November 11th, H.R. 82, the Social Security Fairness Act of 2023, passed the House. So it's been received by the Senate, and it's kind of in their hands now.
Okay, so for those who maybe don't remember every single detail, can you remind us what the Social Security Fairness Act is trying to do?
Sure, so it's seeking to fully repeal both the Windfall Elimination Provision, also known as WEP, and the Government Pension Offset, or GPO. And these are provisions that reduce Social Security benefits for people who also receive a pension from a job, where they didn't pay Social Security taxes,
Gotcha.
which often applies to public servants.
And the argument for repealing them is fairness, right?
Right.
That public servants deserve their full benefits. They paid into the system like everyone else.
Exactly. Proponents of the bill argue that these provisions feel like a penalty for choosing a career in public service. And they point to specific examples, like there was a case of a police officer's widow who received no spousal benefits because of the GPO, to kind of highlight how unfair the outcome can be.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive that someone who dedicated their life to public service might end up being penalized in retirement.
Yeah.
But I know there's also concerns about the financial impact of completely repealing these provisions. Can you kind of walk us through those concerns?
Sure. One of the main arguments against full repeal is the strain that it would put on the Social Security Trust Fund, which is the giant pot of money that holds the revenue from Social Security taxes and pays out benefits to retirees.
Okay. So
Sure.
more money going out in benefits means that it depletes that faster.
Yeah, that's a concern. Opponents of the bill worry that repealing WEP and GPO without any other way to generate revenue or adjust benefits could speed up the insolvency of the program.
And that insolvency is a big concern.
Yeah.
Because it could lead to benefit cuts down the line for everybody. So it's a balancing act between making sure that it's fair for public servants, but also protecting Social Security as a whole.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That's why this debate around H.R. 82 is so complex, because there are valid arguments on both sides.
Now, in addition to the broader arguments for and against the bill, there were some interesting details that came out during the House debate, and I'm specifically thinking about something you mentioned from the congressional record, entry H5922. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, what's fascinating about that entry is that it highlights the concern over the financial impact of H.R. 82, even among those who support the goal of the bill.
So some representatives who voted yes on it still had reservations about the long-term effects.
Exactly. They acknowledge the need for fairness, but also emphasize the importance of fiscal responsibility and making sure that the program is going to be there for future generations.
That adds another layer to the discussion, because even the people who are sympathetic to the arguments for full repeal are grappling with the consequences.
It does, and it really underscores the complexity of reforming Social Security. There are no easy answers. Any changes will likely involve trade-offs.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even when there's a lot of support for a particular bill, like we see with the Social Security Fairness Act, there's still nuances and concerns that need to be considered.
Precisely, and that's why it's crucial to understand all the details and the different perspectives.
Yeah, this has been a really great overview of where we're at right now, but I'm really curious to hear more about what the future might hold for the Social Security Fairness Act.
Let's dive into that next. We'll explore what we can expect from the Senate and what some of the potential outcomes might be for H.R. 82. So where do we go from here?
Well, now that the bill has passed the House, all eyes are on the Senate. And they're going to have to grapple with some of these same questions.
Right, like that balancing act that we talked about between fairness for the public servants and then, that solvency of Social Security for the long term. What are some of the potential scenarios that could play out in the Senate?
Well, one possibility is that the Senate just passes the bill as is, with the same bipartisan support that we saw in the House, which would send a really strong message about that commitment to fairness for public servants. But, that's not a guarantee. There's other possibilities that we have to think about.
What else could happen to the bill?
Well, they could decide to make some changes to the bill, potentially addressing some of the concerns about the financial impact. They might propose some amendments to create a new formula for how we calculate benefits, or explore ways to offset the cost of repealing WEP and GPO.
So we might see a version of the bill that comes out of the Senate that tries to find a different balance between fairness and fiscal responsibility.
Exactly. It's also possible that they just choose to delay a vote, effectively stalling it in committee. This could happen if they decide that other issues are more important right now, or if there's just a lot of opposition within the Senate.
And even if they do pass some version of the bill, there's still another hurdle, right? Doesn't the president have to sign it?
Oh, absolutely. And that adds like a whole other layer of complexity, because the president could sign it into law, or they could veto it and send it back to Congress.
Okay, so we've got a lot of potential outcomes to keep an eye on. Passage as is, modifications, delays, or even a veto. What are some of the key factors that you think will kind of determine how this all plays out?
Well, the political climate is definitely going to be a factor. I mean, it's an election year. And Social Security is always a hot button issue. How the parties position themselves on this issue could have a big impact.
Right, because we'll have candidates trying to appeal to different groups, like public servants, or those who are more concerned about Social Security's long-term health.
Exactly. Another thing to consider is the level of public awareness and, engagement with this. The more people understand about this issue and make their voices heard, the more likely policymakers are going to listen.
So it's not just about what's happening in Washington, it's about what's happening in communities as people learn about this bill and talk about it, and maybe even reach out to their elected officials.
You got it.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be shaped by a lot of things, political calculations, public pressure, expert analysis.
It sounds like there's a lot of uncertainty,
Yeah.
but also a real opportunity to kind of influence the direction of Social Security policy.
Yeah, I agree. This is a moment where people can actually make a difference by staying informed and engaging in these discussions and advocating for what they believe in. You can help shape the future of Social Security.
This has been really helpful in understanding the potential pathways forward. But you mentioned earlier that this debate could be a catalyst for broader Social Security reform. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. The attention that the Social Security Fairness Act has gotten to this issue of fairness and sustainability could create some momentum for more comprehensive reform efforts.
So this particular bill could actually be a starting point for addressing the other problems facing Social Security.
That's the hope. There are other proposals out there, like the Social Security 2100 Act, that aim to tackle broader issues, like shoring up the program's finances, expanding benefits for certain groups, and modernizing the rules to reflect today's workforce.
It sounds like this debate has given us a chance to have those bigger conversations about the future of Social Security.
Yeah, it has. And the more we have those conversations, the better chance we have of creating a system that's fair and sustainable and meets the needs of current and future generations.
This has been really eye-opening. I'm sure our listeners want to know more about those broader reform proposals. But for now, let's move on to the final part of our deep dive. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the long-term implications of this whole WB-GPO debate, even beyond the Social Security Fairness Act. So we've talked about some potential scenarios for the Social Security Fairness Act in the Senate, and even touched on the possibility of broader Social Security reform.
What are the ripple effects of this whole conversation? Even if the Social Security Fairness Act doesn't become law, I think the debate has highlighted some big issues within Social Security.
What do you mean by that? What kind of issues?
Well, we keep coming back to this balancing act, right? Between fairness for individuals and keeping the whole system healthy financially. And the arguments around the WEP and GPO really bring that tension to the forefront.
Yeah, it seems like that's kind of built into any social safety net program, that tension between individual needs and the responsibility to everybody.
Absolutely. And the Social Security Fairness Act, with its focus on repealing those provisions, that are seen as unfair to public servants. It makes us really confront that tension. It's a good example of the larger challenges facing Social Security.
So how do we move forward? How do we find a way to balance those things and make sure Social Security is going to be around for the future?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's one that everyone's going to be thinking about, policymakers, experts, for years to come. But I think this debate has shown that we need a better way, a more thoughtful way to approach Social Security reform.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we need to do more than just make little changes here and there or react to every crisis that comes up. We need to look at the whole system. How can we make it last for the long term? How can it keep up with changing demographics and work patterns? How can it make sure that all Americans have some level of economic security?
That sounds like a really tough job.
It is. But the conversations around the Social Security Fairness Act, they've created this sense of urgency. Like, we can't keep putting this off.
It does feel like a turning point
Yeah.
where small changes might not be enough anymore.
And that's where the real opportunity is. We're having this debate about these specific provisions, but it's opening the door to a bigger discussion about what we want Social Security to be in the future.
Yeah, it's exciting to think about real reform,
Hmm.
but it's also a little intimidating because it's such a big issue.
Definitely complex. But that's why it's so important to understand this stuff and to get involved. The more people know about the problems, the more they can be part of the solution.
So what's the one thing you want listeners to take away from our deep dive?
The future of Social Security is not set in stone. We can shape it by learning about it, getting involved, and being open to new ideas.
That's a great point. We all have a role to play in making sure Social Security is strong for the future.
Exactly. And it starts with being informed, talking about it, and advocating for the kind of Social Security system that we want for ourselves and future generations.
Well said. And on that note, we want to encourage all our listeners to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot, and it helps us keep bringing you these deep dives into important and complex topics. So until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.